Was adobo brought to Mexico from the Philippines by the Spaniards? I don't know for a fact, but it seems like it. Let me unpack this and then give you my version of Mexican adobo. In Mexico, crushed chiles are used along with spices and vinegar to make a red, thick, and spicy sauce. As a marinade, it often goes on meats that are then grilled, but as a sauce, it can be used to simmer meats and other sides. The Mexican adobo base uses the traditional Spanish spices, but adds indigenous ingredients to the mix. So it seems to me that Mexican adobo is a fusion of indigenous and colonial influences. In Spanish, adobo or adobar means to marinate raw food in a sauce made of salt, vinegar, and various spices to preserve and improve its flavor. Marinating is similar to brining, except that brining generally does not include a significant amount of acid. Marinating is also similar to pickling, except that pickling is usually done for much longer periods, mainly to preserve foods. Marinating is usually only performed for a few hours to a day, usually to enhance the food's flavor. Problem: in the Philippines it's generally hot, so without refrigeration, food quickly goes bad, unless it can be preserved. Solution: the Filipino adobo, which is basically the national dish of the Philippines. The dish includes meat, seafood, or vegetables, marinated in vinegar, soy sauce, and garlic. The food is then browned in oil and simmered in the marinade. The acid in the vinegar and the high salt content of the soy sauce deters bacteria's growth in meat. When the Spanish arrived and colonized the Philippines, they saw what the Filipino people did to their meat and probably got inspired by it. Filipino adobo is an indigenous dish that received a Spanish name, perhaps because it reminded the Spaniards of how they marinated and preserved meat with spices. So when comparing the Filipino adobo to the Mexican one, it's easy to see some similarities: vinegar, garlic, and the marination of meat. From there, each culture uses local spices that make sense based on their location and flavor profiles. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, hi everyone, my name is Isaac, welcome back to Copy and Baste. This is episode 5 in the Campechano Taquería series. These last few episodes are all building blocks in preparation for the first taco I'm going to recreate from Campechano's menu, Taco al Pastor. But more on that in the following episodes, so stay tuned. In the last episode I prepared Salsa Matcha, an oil-based sauce made with various dried peppers and nuts. In this episode, as you can probably guess, I'm going to prepare adobo. Similar to previous recipes, I start with pan roasting the peppers using a cast iron skillet. Roasting the anchos and the guajillos brings out the natural flavors in them and adds a slight smoky flavor. Once you see the first signs of smoke, transfer the peppers into a bowl filled with hot water for them to soak and hydrate. I cover the bowl with a small plate to make sure that they are kept underwater. Next, I take apart a head of garlic and prepare about 8 cloves for roasting. I move them around for a while until I notice black roasting marks on them. I put them aside and let them cool down for a bit before peeling their skins off. Next, it's time to roast the spices. I use a whole cinnamon stick, so I snap it into smaller chunks before adding it to the pan. I add the Mexican oregano, cloves, a few whole grains of black pepper, and a pinch of salt to the cinnamon chunks. I add all of the spices to the skillet and roast them until the first sign of smoke. Then, I transfer them to a molcajete and grind them into a fine powder, covering the top with my other hand so that the spices don't go all over the place. I transfer them into a small bowl. Now that the garlic had a chance to cool down for a bit, I peel it and set it aside. Once the pepper are fully hydrated, I take them out of the bowl, removing the stems and some of the seeds. Depending on how hot you want your adobo to be, the more seeds you keep, the hotter the adobo would be. I add the apple cider vinegar, ground spices, and garlic cloves to the peppers and blend them into a fine paste. I also add some of the resting liquids to the dried peppers since my blender needs some help. I let the blender do its thing for a minute or two, then transfer the adobo paste into a jar. That's it. That's my version of Mexican adobo. There are other variations of adobo as well. To name a few, you can find adobo in Puerto Rico, Peru, and Uruguay. So, is adobo seasoning healthy? Oregano is the only herb in many adobo seasoning blends. It is rich in vitamin K and minerals like iron and calcium. The black pepper in adobo is also a good source of iron. Do spices ever go bad? From a safety perspective, they should be fine. But you may not be pleased with the results when it comes time to flavoring your food. Spices don't actually spoil, but over time, spices will lose their potency and they will not flavor the food as you intended. As a general rule, whole spices will stay fresh for about 4 years, ground spices for about 3 to 4 years, and dried leafy herbs for 1 to 3 years. So, what do you think? What do you usually use adobo in? What ingredients do you add to your adobo? Let me know in the comments below. You're probably expecting me to ask you to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to share with you my favorite YouTubers that I follow. And this time, you should check out Johnny Harris. Johnny is a filmmaker and a journalist. He explains complex issues in an easy to understand way by mixing motion graphics with cinematic videography. Yeah, not food related, but an excellent source for inspiration nonetheless. I hope you found this video helpful or at least entertaining. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next time. Provecho, provecho, provecho.